All right, everybody can come grab a seat. How many of you, this is your first LVTech meetup? Couple, all right, well, good to have you here. This is what we do roughly monthly. Usually it's either a presentation, demo of some type of product. Last month, actually, we had a bunch of college students pitch their business plans for our now annual business pitch competition. Sometimes it's demos of products, sometimes it's more of a technical deep dive, and tonight we're going to do a talk on lean manufacturing processes applied to product development. So grab a slice, have a seat. Just want to mention, for those of you who are new and even those of you who aren't, this summer I just posted on the meetup site a bunch of meetups that we'll be doing hopefully at the Fab Lab. We still have to get everything lined up with Jeff, so the dates may move a little bit. But it's going to be each month is going to take a look at a different type of technology for making stuff. So in June we'll be taking a look at 3D printing, processes from how you model it to how you slice it, what you print it on, and then a look at different printer technologies, what different advantages they may give you. July we're going to talk about mold making, which may seem kind of rudimentary, but it's very interesting if you're looking to replicate things in, say, low-run manufacturing. Can be a lot faster than 3D printing, right? Or at least you can make things faster than what you might be able to do on a printer. So July will be mold making, and then August is going to be like digital woodworking, or whatever you really want to call it, but CNC machines, and how you can use them to either do everything from just simple cuts to make flat pack furniture out of plywood, or even more high-end prototypes carved out of a solid block of something, which doesn't really have to be wood. It can be any type of material. But instead of additive manufacturing, which is the 3D printing side, subtractive manufacturing, being able to just throw a block of something and have a CNC carve out whatever your design is. So take a look at the meetup site, RSVP for those. If you can make it, I think it's going to be a really good time. We have one of, if not the best Fab Lab in the country, and that's not just them saying that, but that's kind of recognized from the other Fab Labs. It's some pretty amazing machinery there. I think Henry, is there, right? They just put in they got the plasma cutter up and running, yep. Right? So they've got a CNC plasma cutter, and 4x8. The 4x8 sheet CNC machine is relatively new, I think. They've got a couple metal lathes and laser cutters, 3D printers, a host of things. So definitely check out what we have on the meetup site. If you've not subscribed or joined the meetup officially, do that so you can get notices when we post new meetups. I'm glad to see y'all here, and I'm going to turn over to Sneha. Did I get it right?
Yes.
All right, to talk about lean product development.
Hi everyone. So I have met already some of you. Thank you so much for attending the Lehigh Valley Tech Meetup. Today we're going to talk about lean product development. I'm going to get my slide set up. Give me 1 second. So just to give you a little bit of introduction about myself, my name is Sneha Mantala. I go by the online brand name as the Power Monk. I have a website. I'm very active on a lot of social media. My background is in engineering. My undergrad was in mechanical engineering back in India. I did my master's in the University of Illinois, Chicago. I did master's in industrial engineering. After that, I got recruited by Amazon, worked with the robotics projects as a program manager. And at that point, I used to go to different fulfillment centers. My travel was from 50 to 80% at some points of time. I would go to different fulfillment centers and make sure that the robot is launched and is well integrated into the operations. Some of the operators or the associates who work there, they would see me come in and they would be like, "Oh, there she is again. You're here to steal our jobs." And my answer to them at that point would be, if a robot can do your job, maybe you could step up and do something better. And that is when I started volunteering as a leadership coach to help these guys work on their resumes, work on their interview skills to make sure that they can become the next team lead, they can become the next ambassador, they can become the next supervisor. And at that point, I decided that maybe I don't want to work with robots anymore. I want to work with people. So I did a career 180. Now I'm working with Fanatics. For those of you who don't know, who follows sports? right? So we make all the on-field uniforms for all the baseball teams, and we make sports fan gear for all the other major leagues and minor leagues. We have a facility with about 600 operators and about 120 staff in Easton, Pennsylvania. So that is where I work. And right now I'm working as a training and development manager. So everything that's related to their operational training, manufacturing training, as well as leadership development, I head the department. A lot more fulfilling than what I used to do, and I'm really, really happy about that. But they say that you can't strip out the engineer no matter what career you're in. So I always make sure that I'm up to date with whatever is happening, and I try and think about working on my brand, right, the Power Monk. I think even though it's not a physical product, it is still a digital product. So that is what brings me here to talk about lean product development, okay? All right, so I know that all of you guys are here for a reason. How many of you are working on an existing product? Awesome. What type of product? Physical, digital? I know you're digital, Devin.
Yeah, digital.
Any physical product? Awesome. Example?
Wellness, fitness area.
Awesome.
How specific should I get?
No, that was enough.
Because I could get really detailed, but I'd rather not.
That's okay. And who here is here to start working on a new product? Any plans? Awesome. All right. So, well, the whole point about product development is that it can get a little convoluted. There's going to be roundabouts. There's going to be constant feedback that you'll be receiving, and there's going to be constant back and forth. And the title of product developer or a product manager sounds really cool to someone who's outside the area, but it can get really nasty, long working hours, so I can totally understand. But before we get started today, I just want to, I know you just had some pizza, so let's do an activity. We have about 20 people here. I want you to get divided into like maybe 4 people per team. What we're going to do is collect physical items that are in your bags and build a tower out of it. But it is going to be timed. You would have 2 minutes to do it, and you can't use more than 10 items. The goal of the activity is to build the tallest tower possible. You can use the tables here by the wall or the ones in the back.
I know, yeah, that's the wrong group to do this with.
We have no bags.
No bags today?
Oh, well, Tim wins. He's got the tripod.
It came in my bag. I can make it taller.
So no more than 10 items?
There's some cups in the back if anybody wants to.
I'll give you about 2 minutes to group up and think of your strategy. But there can't be any stacking until I start the timer. No stacking yet.
Wow.
No more than 4 people in a team.
Okay.
No stacking until I start the timer. So that's cheating. Okay, so if you guys are ready, I'm going to start the timer. Shall I?
Go for it.
Okay. You have 2 minutes. Go.
Stack the table. I think we might be going analyze to this, right? What are we gonna do here? Okay. I got maybe go
Open up. Yeah,
I can give the table back. Like a ready. Then put the table.
If you're using a table as a base, I will not count the table.
Now we need the plates. That's a problem.
30 seconds left.
You need, it was too flexible.
Wow.
Three of those is a pyramid. No, 3 of those is a pyramid, I'll do another layer. Yeah, we're like at our limit.
Okay, done. Alright.
Hey, good job. Oh, that's awesome. Well, I don't
The
know, they're
tower
pretty
needs
close
to
over
be
there.
stable.
But they have to let go.
The tower needs to be stable.
Oh.
Okay, awesome.
Oh,
You want this to be a competition? You want me to measure?
Just like anything in your bag, right? That's not in your bag.
very creative.
Okay, that was smart. Because if you would have used the table at the bottom, I wouldn't have thought of that. Smart. Okay. I think clearly this. Oh wait, we have another one. But I'm not counting the table there. So probably this is the tallest. And
Do we have chairs? Oh, we do have
I
chairs.
think that's it.
but I like their tower, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
They probably get the most accurate.
Yeah,
Out of bag.
Yeah.
Fourth.
We didn't use a table, we came from the floor, so everything was raw.
Yeah, I feel like that's the most impressive because it looks like stuff from the bag.
Yeah.
But is it taller than this one on the floor over here?
That's close, but I mean, I think we got it.
This looks like a very expensive tower. Laptop and phones, right? 3 phones and 1 laptop.
Only one crack.
Love that one. Okay, let's get the tiny bag.
Okay, awesome. First of all, thank you for being a sport.
Yeah,
And thank you for not hurting
great meetup for
yourselves.
Wayne not to be here.
Well done, thank you.
Okay. Might be out there on Friday.
Congratulations, amazing attempt. And congratulations for building your product. This was a product, right? You just built a product. Your tower was a product. You had limited resources. I told you, I'm not going to count the table. I told you not more than 10 items. So you had limited resources. Also limited time. You had only 2 minutes to work on it. And this is how product development works in the real world, right? You're building a product with limited resources and limited time.
Hopefully
Also-
specific requirements.
Yes, with more standard, yeah, more standard.
Actually, yeah, just said no.
All right, and what are we trying to do? We wanted to build the tallest tower possible. So we are trying to maximize the value of the product with whatever we have, right? That is exactly what you did. So no matter what type of product you'll be working on, a physical product like the items that you just used, or a digital product like a mobile app or a software application, or it could even be a service product, coaching, consulting, social media brands, influencer brands, all these are service products, right? And whatever the type of product is, lean product development is the answer for it. And we're going to talk about it. So we kind of understood what product development is. The other part of the topic is lean. So what comes to your mind when you think of lean?
Beef.
No fat.
Well, best use of the available resources, the fewest resources possible.
Yes, so you're stripping down the excess, you're trying to be as lean as possible at your core, you're trying to make the most usage of whatever you have. And that is exactly what lean thinking is. A lot of engineers consider it as a tool. I think it's a mindset. It's something that you can apply to a lot of different things, to your life, to your thinking, to your processes, to your product. And there's basically three really important principles that we follow with lean thinking. The first one is that we are not innovating for the sake of innovation. We are innovating to simplify the product. We are innovating to simplify our life. Second one, all processes have two types of activities. We have value-added activities, those that add value, those that the customer is willing to pay for. The other half is going to be non-value-added activities. So stripping down the process or the operation from the non-value-added activities will lead to a waste-free operation. That's the second principle of lean thinking. Finally, when you're doing these two things, you're eventually maximizing the value. You're lean at your core, you're trying to maximize your profit, you're trying to minimize the resources that you're using, and you're finally increasing the value with what you're using. Now, why do we need lean thinking? Why is lean thinking a thing? Why are different industries so crazy about it? We have lean coaches that industries actually hire. Well, when you are cutting down the excess, you're lean at your core, you're being efficient. You're increasing the scope of your profit as a company, as an organization. And when you're lean at your core, it's easy for you to change directions, right? With the changing market demands, with the changing environment, it's easy for you to be flexible. And finally, it gives you an edge over the competition, because why would I spend $1,000 on a product if you can offer it to me for $100, for example? And that is why lean thinking has really taken off. Traditionally, lean thinking was being used in the manufacturing industry a lot, and then it started getting applied to continuous improvement of processes. But this decade, a lot of product developers and managers are hell-bent on using these principles for product development too. And we're going to talk how it is going to be applicable. So we talked about what product development is, you did the activity, we talked about what lean thinking is. How do these two come together? So when you're thinking lean while you're developing the product, you're thinking of aggressively reducing the waste, especially if you are a startup, especially if you don't have a lot of budget to spare when you're developing the product. And what are you going to do after that? You want to deliver it with the maximum value. It's not the value that you consider or I consider, it's the true value that the customer is going to be willing to pay for. You do that, you'll be the first one to launch in the market, you'll be the first person in front of the customer. And guess what? Lesser competition. Okay. So when there's uncertainty in the market, and that's how it is, right? It is the age of digitization, customization, and reduced time to market, which means that when a customer wants something, they want it now. And if you're not lean, you're thinking of all these big grand plans when you're building the product, it's going to take you so much more time and energy in order to get in front of the customer. Also, if you're lean in your process and in your product, it's so much more affordable for the customer. Like I said, I won't pay $1,000 for something that can be done in $100. Again, ultimately, allows you to place yourself in front of the customer as soon as possible. Who here has some experience with sales? There is this very famous phrase, always be closing, right? Glengarry's speech. Always be closing. So in the area of lean thinking, we always say, always be validating. So every step that you take, you need to validate it. You need to learn from it. You need to be sure that the next step that you're going to take is lean. You're not really spending so much of time and resources on doing something really grand. but you're validating that that next step is going to take you one step closer to where your final product is going to be. Any questions so far?
I would also just comment that some experience where, you know, we had a mindset, this mindset that you discussed of being lean, where it was either a build or buy, you know, in a corporate environment, whether or not how long would it take us to build our own versus going out and acquire a company that had a product that was maybe closer to be ready. So that mindset was adopted that way as we went along, saying either build or buy.
Exactly. I've worked with Oracle before, and I was discussing with June here that we acquired PeopleSoft and had hosted so many products on that software, and that's what Amazon is doing too right now. Instead of going and purchasing their own brick and mortar spaces, they just acquired Whole Foods. Makes everything so much easier for them. So thank you so much. That was a value addition. So that has concluded what lean product development actually is. But the more important portion of this session is I want to discuss the application of it. I don't want you guys to leave and think, okay, how do we really apply it? I really want to dive deep into the application. So the how of product development is really divided into 3 simple steps. First one is customer-centric thinking. Second one, lean prototyping. Third one is agile product development. And we're going to talk about each of these 3 steps in detail. Just trying to sum it up here. Okay, so let's start off with customer-centric thinking. Who is a customer?
In my case, it was anybody who uses our applications.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be somebody outside the company. We talked then about interior or inner and outer customers, but anybody who's going to use the application, anybody who would use the service that I provided is a customer.
Excellent point. They can be internal or they could be external. There could be someone downstream of you in your own organization. Yes.
The one who buys your product is your customer.
The one who's willing to buy your product, willing to shell out their money. So in India, we always say customer is king. Customer is king. We want to serve them. Customer is king. And Amazon is also holds it really close to heart, be it internal or external. So it's so important for us to get into the mind of a customer and start thinking like them, which is what this first step is all about. So I'll give you a quick peek into the mind of the customer. So the day of a customer is going to look like this. What do we want? Everything. When do we want it? Now. They're entitled and they have every right to be so. So am I. So are you. We all are customers, right? We order something from Amazon, we don't want to wait for it. We want it to reach our doorstep as soon as possible. Was this possible a decade ago? No. Is it possible now? Yes. And when it's possible, why can't I get it? If I'm a customer, that's the question that's going to run in my mind. So let's take a hypothetical situation. And it was kind of rainy, but it's nice that the sun is coming up. But let's say a customer stepped out in the rain and they got their shoes wet. Hypothetical situation. And they groan, they're like, I don't want to get my shoes wet. Why doesn't someone do anything about it? You as an entrepreneur or you as a product developer, something's going to click in your mind and you're like, maybe I can do something about it. Maybe that is a new market segment that I can target. But before you start thinking, I really want you to think about this. Is it a problem that is worth solving? How do you know if it's a problem that's worth solving? With these 3 questions. Do the customers need it? There's a difference between needing and wanting. They need something, they're willing to pay for it now. They want something, they'll probably add it to their wish list and think about it later. I do that all the time. I go shopping on Amazon, I add stuff to my cart and review it the next day and probably delete half of the items from the cart. So do the customers need it is the first question. Second, are they willing to pay for it? The kind of money that goes into it. And finally, is it feasible? Do you have the resources and the ability in order to create that product, the solution for that problem? Otherwise, for that hypothetical situation, you're going to end up with something silly like this. Shoe umbrellas. Who wants to buy it? No one. No one's going to pay for it. So at this point, I just want to sum up the step 1. you have a problem. You think about it from a customer point of view. And I don't know how many of you attended the design thinking meetup, but that was an excellent session about how to empathize with the customer and how to think from their point of view. And then you ask yourself, do they really need it? Will they pay for it? That's about them. Then about you, do I have the resources and the ability to create the product for it? Yes, if your answer is yes for all those questions, then you can come up with a hypothesis and a plan. Now you all are the subject matter experts in your own departments and your own industries, right? I'm not the person to talk about what research goes into the problem solving or what sort of hypothesis you need to come up with. Here's an example. Let's say we have millennials or people like you and me, for example, who have trouble with sleeping. That's a problem, and I think people really need the solution for it. So you start thinking of why is it that they are having problems with their sleep? And then you start thinking about it from a customer point of view. You start doing your research. And then probably you find out, maybe because they're browsing through a lot of social media before sleeping, that probably the blue light from the screen is affecting their sleep cycle, and that's why they're not able to fall asleep. And even if they do, it's not really a deep sleep. So you start doing your own research and then come up with a plan for your solution. It could be a physical product. Maybe you can build an alarm clock that is not a mobile phone, because again, if you're tempted to use the alarm on the mobile phone, you can get tempted to use all the other applications on the phone. It could be a digital product. It could be seriously a mobile app where maybe in order to turn off the alarm, I have to walk to the bathroom and scan the barcode on my toothpaste, for example. It could be a service product. It could be consultation for sleep ailments, right? So again, developing the hypothesis and developing the plan is your subject matter expertise. I'm just talking about what the sequence of steps looks like. So at this point, I want you to ask yourself, what are some of the pain points in your industry? And this is for the ones who want to start working on a new product or open for ideas on building a new product. What are some of the pain points in your industry? But more important question is, which of those problems are worth solving? So before you jump right into creating the product, ask yourself which ones of those are worth solving. People are complaining all the time. There's problems everywhere you're going to see. You just need to be able to pick and choose the ones that are worth solving. Okay? Any questions about step 1? All right, so let's get into step 2. It's lean prototyping. And we already talked about what lean is. Any idea what prototyping is or what a prototype is?
It's the first version of something.
The first version, exactly, the alpha version or the beta version.
The terminology in the software industry uses a proof of concept.
Yes. So a working model that shows the proof of concept, exactly. The only difference is now when you're trying to build a prototype, you're thinking about it in a lean manner. Okay? So a lot of product developers or entrepreneurs, whenever they jump into creating a product, they're like, I want to cram in as many features as possible into this product. Why? How many of those features are really valid? How many of those features is a customer really paying for? Let's say I subscribe to Netflix. Am I really watching true crime? Am I really watching movies? Am I really watching dramas? A little bit of survey there can help customize your product better suited for your target audience. Okay, here I want to introduce a concept of minimum viable product, an MVP. A lean prototype is nothing but an MVP. And what is an MVP? It is basically a product that has the minimum set of features that are going to satisfy the customer, but are also solid enough, standard enough so that you can derive validated learning from it. Let's say a product has minimum set of features, but I'm not really going to use it. So how are you going to learn if the MVP is really working or not? So it needs to have the minimum set of features, but also be viable enough so that you can collect the validated learning from it. And why do we need an MVP? And I'm going to talk about the examples of MVP in a little while, but why do we need an MVP? let's say unfortunately you spend lots and lots of time in creating the product and it doesn't click, it's heartbreaking, right? Here's where the MVP is going to help you. It's a little sample that you can release to the customer, and with that proof of concept, you're going to know whether it's good enough to develop, or should I just stop right now and drop it? And that's okay. At least you're dropping early and you're saving your resources, right? Also, it allows you to launch it quickly in the market. You're not waiting for months together to launch that perfect product. You're releasing something quick and early. That way you're in front of the customers as soon as possible. And finally, you have the MVP and you're collecting all this learning. You are going to create a kick-ass product because now you're co-designing with the customer. You're collecting their feedback and adding necessary features based on their feedback. And that is why an MVP is important. And here are some examples. Let's say a customer walks into your bakery. Let's say you all own bakeries. And they're really hungry. Are you going to ask them to fill out a survey and then create an amazing donut and then serve it to them? No, you're going to offer what you have or quickly put something together and create a plain donut and give it to them, make them feel a little comfortable. Then ask them, okay, so you not just had the plain donut, I hope that served you well, but what more would you like on your donut to feel more satisfied or get more bang for your buck? Then you collect their feedback and then work towards your product. So the plain donut here in this case will be the MVP. Does that make sense? Here's another example and another way to look at the MVP. Let's say your kid's birthday is coming up and you want to try out a different flavor. Let's say strawberry shortcake. And you've never baked a cake with a strawberry shortcake flavor before and you're not sure how the kids are going to react to it. What you can do is maybe you can quickly bake a few cupcakes with that flavor, feed it to your kid and some of the kids' friends, and get them licking their fingers and wanting for more. So now you're not just launching an MVP and collecting feedback, but now you're making them want more. So now they're hoping and waiting for your actual product release. That's another way to look at the MVP. So finally, your cake is going to be your product, the cupcake is going to be an MVP. Does that help clarify? Okay, so nothing complex going on here, but every product has different elements to it. It has the functional element, it has the reliability element, it has the usability element. And a lot of designers forget this. It also has an emotional element. A lot of people are brand crazy, right? Their whole wardrobe is filled with, let's say, Versace. Why? Because it really connects with them. Is it because only Versace makes the best garments in the world? No. It has its own competitors. Why do some people go crazy and fill their wardrobe with that one particular brand? Because it resonates with them. That's where the emotional element comes in. Whenever a designer is building a product, they tend to focus only on the functional aspect of it. I want to put in all these features. I want everyone to use it. I want it to be excellent. And that is what the blue bar here is going to show. And you don't want to do this. You want the blue bar to go up the pyramid. You want something that's functional. You want something that's reliable. You want something that's usable. And most importantly, you want your MVP to resonate with the customer. Make them go, aha, I want this. I want more from this person. I just want to wait for what the next product release is going to look like. So don't just focus on the functional aspects of it. Try and, again, this also builds from the customer-centered thinking, right? When you start thinking from the perspective of the customer, you really know what ticks with them, right? You really know what excites them. And trying to include those elements into your product is what can make it successful. And what are you do? How are you doing all this? You're trying to be lean as much as possible. You're not waiting to include all that in your final product. You're including all that in your MVP itself. You're launching it. You're seeing how it's doing, learning from it, then deciding, okay, should I drop it? Maybe it didn't really work out, and that's okay. A lot of entrepreneurs have projects that have failed. Edison once said, I didn't fail 10,000 times. I just found 10,000 ways that don't work. But let's say your MVP was a success and you decide to develop it. That is where the third step comes into picture. But so far was lean prototyping. Okay, any questions?
Do you find that this applies differently to bigger or more established companies than it does to smaller ones? For instance, if a brand new company were to release an MVP and it's not quite what they thought it was, do you think that they've now, you know, we talked about brands, do you think that they have now sacrificed their brand in the eyes of those potential early adopters that they can't recover, whereas a big company just has one failure out of many successes?
I think there are some experiments that brands sometimes risk. I think there's always some sort of a risk analysis that is involved in it, but I have seen some brands risk it. Just for me personally, again, an internal customer is as important as an external customer is what I feel. So when I was launching these robots, we had launched some pretty silly prototypes too, where they were like, we are never going to use it. We trained them 100%, but they were sitting like a piece of junk for the next 4 years. No one really touched it. No one really cared about it. That's when we probably got in and learned from our mistakes, when chose another vendor who could work on a better MVP, and it took off after a point. I think there is a risk involved there. But I would say the higher risk is to spend a lot of resources and come up with a product that you think is going to work and then launch it, and then it could become a bigger failure and cause a bigger risk. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's a good answer.
All right.
Another question. So MVP getting to market, would you prioritize getting to market as soon as possible and like whatever the MVP quality?
So I think the quality.
Take another weekend, 2 weeks, and say this is a little bit better, and then we go to market.
So I would say that we never compromise on the quality of the MVP. However, we are limiting the number of features that I can focus on. So instead of thinking of 50 features that I can improve the quality on, let me just focus on 2 features. So depending on the project management and the timeline that we have set up, let's say my deadline is to launch something in a month, and I can't really perfect all the 50 features. I can focus on the first 5, the top 5, based on what my research and my hypothesis tell me. And then make sure that the quality is as high as possible. And my husband is a quality engineer, and he can say, he works with Mack trucks, and he can say that quality is never achieved. No, at least not 100%. There is always going to be some scope there, and that's okay. I think there is always a humanistic factor to these products, but where your product is going to win is make it click with the customers emotionally, and I think they'll be quick to forgive the other shortcomings. And I have done that with the products that I have bought. Sometimes I'm not really happy with something I bought. I'd be like, no, but I really love how it feels, you know, how I can hear great music with these headphones. So what if it's not wireless? It's okay, you know. That is something that I feel as a customer. So did that answer your question?
Can I ask another question?
Mm-hmm.
So when you say, let's say, it costs you $100 to make the MVP,
Mm-hmm.
and let's say I have actually $500 available, why wouldn't I make 5 MVPs and have them all 5 go to the market and have, statistically speaking, more chance to, and also more chance to have more information?
Right. So.
Instead of iteratively going.
All right. So the way I look at it is MVP is an experiment. And whenever we are experimenting, we want to experiment in a very controlled and ideal environment. So when you're putting out, let's say, more than 5 different types of solutions and 5 different types of products, there is a chance that the data can be skewed. So when you're really collecting all the data back and you're trying to analyze which one did well and which one did not, it can get a little bit confusing. So maybe limited to 2 MVPs, that's a very good idea. If you have the resources, then why not? The only important thing to remember there is that, are you doing it in a controlled environment? Do you know how you're getting your data? Do you know how much to trust that data? So that you don't get confused about what to choose over what. Especially because product managers can get attached to the products that they're releasing. They could be like, oh, no, this data supports let's say MVP number 1, let's go with MVP number 1. So just to make sure that we are as objective as possible is the key there. So I think it is definitely possible. I have not, I just like to stay safe, but I think it is a risky move, and I think the benefit with that also can be higher.
Are you talking about five products for the same need, or 5 different products for 5 different needs?
No, 5 versions of the same product. So not like when you say something, an alarm clock and then something completely different. Not in that way. But like you have, let's say we have an app. We have an app with these functionalities, and then the same app with some other functionalities, and then maybe a third app with one of each combined in the third app. And you say, well, I release them to as many people as possible, so that I then can see like which ones seem to be giving me the best information in that same maybe 2 weeks period. Instead of I go for 2 weeks. Oh yeah, they like feature 1. They don't like feature 2. Now I make one with feature 1, and then I add another feature 2. Maybe they don't like it. Then I'm like 3 weeks further before I know that these 2 features are useful. That's the thinking.
That actually reminds me
Maybe
of a
go
real life
faster.
example. I have a YouTube channel, and what a lot of YouTubers do is that with what type of thumbnail gets the highest click rate. So what they do is, instead of trying out one design of thumbnail and waiting it out and then testing another type of thumbnail, they can do a split testing, 2 or 3 different types of thumbnails, and see which one is getting a higher click rate. So that is an example of having more than one MVP. So let's say I'm sure that MVP number 2 is getting the highest click rate, then I can continue to develop in that style itself. Another way to do it is, let's say I'm publishing a video. I want to start one with a story. I want to start another with an animation. That's another way of addressing the same concern. My concern is to help someone with a concept, and I want to explain that concept. I can do it in 2 ways. Do a split testing. I think it's possible. I have not personally, but I think it is. It's
Yeah, I
something
think
that
a lot depends on, what do you know about customer needs? Because as a customer, there are different ways you can get to that. So I think you're right, with a virtual product like thumbnail, I think you have a lot of ways to do it.
Yeah.
I think somebody talked about enterprises. If you're really building an electric car, it'll cost you a little bit more. So I think what I've seen is, you have certain core competencies. I think she talked about resources and capabilities. So if it is just variations of the same thing that you're testing to the same set of customers with the same needs, then I think there's value in doing 3, you're segmenting the customers and trying it. But if they're completely different set of customers with different needs, you're talking about different products. So so that means you're like boiling the ocean with 5 products. I think that's her point.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're extending yourself with 5 different products to 5 different customer segments. That means you need to have much bigger organization, right? That you can think of large companies could do. So it really depends on what are you trying to get done.
Okay, so at this point, I want you to ask yourselves, what is your hypothesis and the plan? Remember, the last set of questions was what are the pain points and which ones are really worth solving. Now, once you filter down which ones are worth solving, what is the hypothesis and the plan involved? All right, now you've narrowed down on the plan. What is your MVP going to look like? If you have a list of 50 features you want to add to your product, what are those top 5 features that you know for sure that your MVP should have? And then once you launch the MVP, what are your plans of collecting the feedback? Remember, validated learning, so integral to product development. What are the different ways you can do it? Surveys can be one thing. Really interacting with the customers could be another thing. Asking someone to hosting a contest, asking them to give ideas for improvements in the app, for example, can be another way of collecting validated learning. So those are some of the questions that you can ask yourself at the end of step 2. Sorry.
Quick question, do you recommend using a survey by itself? Or even, I guess I could extend that to any one thing by itself?
Was that an MVP, you're saying?
No, after you have your MVP done, to get feedback,
Yeah, I think a lot of teams definitely use surveys after launching an MVP. What is the alternative to that?
Well, my thing with surveys is I'm a writer and it's really hard. Like, I think sometimes surveys are written that they almost are self-destined to give the result you're looking for.
Right,
So you can
Makes
get
sense.
really misleading,
makes sense.
that, you know, or there's either too little that you're asking, too much you're asking. So, you know I get skeptical of a lot of survey questions I read, because I can see 2 or 3 different possible interpretations.
Right, and I follow a company called SurveyMonkey. They help build out survey forms.
Right, and they're good at that.
They are really good at that, and some of the advice that they give addresses specifically the problem that you were talking about. Are we really giving them the answer when we are building out the survey? Is the point. Otherwise, are your surveys so exhausting that people are like 5 out of 5 out of 5 out of 5? And that happens. I've done that sometimes just to get to the end page. Maybe they say, okay, you get a $50 Amazon card if you complete the survey. I don't care what answers I give. I just care about the gift card, right? So yeah, surveys can sometimes be misrepresentative of the real learning that you want to collect. I think based on the scope of your project or your product, face-to-face interactions can really help. And I know it doesn't work out in large organizations, but if you're just starting off, if it's a startup, I think just going out there and interacting with the customers is really going to be helpful. Also, when you're developing the hypothesis, at that point you're also doing your research and finding out and conducting surveys or interviews with the customers, right? It's also always easy to go back to those customers and ask them hey, you just told me about all this stuff that you went through, and then I designed this. What do you think about it now? And yes, those would be the early adopters like you were talking about. So you could ask those early adopters, what do you think about that now? So focusing on those few people can also be a nice controlled environment to collect your data. But again, how is your sampling looking like? Are you biased in your selection of early adopters? Those are some of the questions you can ask yourself.
So can I weigh on that? Because you can get biased in even in getting feedback from your prototype. So you really want to put the prototype in their hands and sit back and watch them. If it's a physical prototype, you want to put it in their hands and watch their reactions and get feedback like that. So it depends on the type of prototype you have, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. When I was working in Amazon, we were actually given the first prototypes of some of the devices that Amazon is building, and they were like, we're not going to ask you any questions at all. Just go, take it home, use it for a month, come back, just tell us what your experience was. And that way they can start documenting everything and nothing's going to be biased in that way. Because if I'm thrilled with the product, I can only talk about what's amazing. That is a learning point. If I'm pissed off with the product, I can talk about what pissed me off, and that is also a good learning.
Right. And then the weighing on the, if you put out 5 different prototypes, you could do design of experience or multivariate testing if you're familiar with that. That's the Lean Six Sigma terminology, but you can do that as well.
Did you ever?
I'm a master black belt. I'm a design thinker, a whole bunch of other stuff. So
Okay. Did you ever apply that?
Absolutely, sure.
Give us an example.
So for marketing, say for instance you want to find out who your target audience is, right? So you can come up with the critical factors of what those persona types are, and then you can go out and test it. So for example, if you say, okay, I'm looking for different geographics, different age groups, stuff like that. So you create a controlled test plan, and then you execute that controlled test plan. So I can get a whole discussion on that, but that's just the high level. And then from that feedback, you can pinpoint, you can take the data, analyze it, and you can pinpoint specifically, who's your target audience and what your product features, what features of your product do they resonate with.
Right, and at that point, you could probably release different types of products for those different market segments based on the data you've released, or just cater to, let's say, the biggest market segment with whom the most number of features are resonating, and just stick with that.
Absolutely. Once you get, that's called a confirmation run. So once you run it and your data pops back, who's driving the results you're looking for, then you do another run, which is called a confirmation run, which is you just doing that particular market and you just run all out. So
it's like a confirmation.
Confirmation.
Nice, awesome. Okay, so once you ask yourself those questions and you have launched your MVP, you get your learning from it. The next question is, are you going to drop it or develop it? when you decide to develop it, that is when we can get into the next step, agile product development. Anyone uses an agile way of working? Your experience with agile, please?
Well, I've been in two places. The first was definitely, again, I'm not a purist, and for those unfamiliar with Agile, I can't explain. But the first place was definitely Agile, but I mean, they were pretending to have daily scrums, but they really weren't doing anything Agile. That was a disaster. But the second place, we were sort of forced to convert to Agile. We had a great, reluctant to be, but a lady was reluctant to be Scrum Master, but was really good at it. They gave us good training and they really supported it. And I thought it did help us work more efficiently.
Yes, and I think to your point, whenever engineers and product developers are working on a project, they can get so, I think, just so involved in the process itself that they forget to manage the project. And at that point, Scrum Masters or Agile coaches really come in handy because they're now focusing, hey, I know you got to do all this stuff, but we really want to stick to our timeline. That is where a lot of companies do not, a lot of companies do not want to spend a lot of money on that, but I have seen really good, big organizations benefit really well with Scrum Masters and Lean Agile coaches. Okay, so let's get into step number 3. When you're building a product, you're developing it, right? Now you know your MVP work, but when you're building out the product, you can do it in 2 ways. I spent a lot of time. I know my MVP was a success, so I know exactly what people need. So I'm going to take some 8 months and work on it. Or you could release the product early and often. That's another way of working. I have put together a little graph to explain that. It's nothing crazy. The white line here shows the agile way of developing the product. Every dot is a touch base with the customer. The red line here, big products, amazing products, but as you can see, they are far spaced out. That's a traditional way of product development. And I can give you an example. So something that's not agile, let's say like a large truck, so much more difficult for it to change lanes, right? But let's say you have a hatchback or a sedan, it's so much easier for you to change lanes. Another real world example, Nokia. At one point of time, half of the world was using their phones. What happened after that? They kind of disappeared. Why? Because they were taking so much time to gather the customer requirements, work on their next product and release it. They were kind of following the red line. What happened at that point? All these other companies like Apple, Samsung came into the picture, started following the white line where they were releasing every updated product within a year or two. They were constantly in front of the faces of the customer. So when you follow the white line is exactly what agile product development is. You're working on updates in quick iterations, and those frequent small iterations are what are called as sprints. And that is exactly what every agile team really uses. They work in sprints. So each gap between the dot is a quick sprint. At one point you're going to reach the MVP. Amazing, your MVP was a success. You're still working in good sprints until you reach the product that you think you want to be at. But see that the line is not really ending there. It is still continuing beyond what you think is a final product. So let's say, taking the example of Apple, from 5 to 6 was a big change. So let's say they were testing out touch screens before 5, and then they're like, no, Apple's design is kind of going to look like 6. So let's say they hit the final product at 6, but they didn't stop there. The changes are small every year or with every model, but there are changes. Are people trading in their old phones and buying the new ones? Yes. Is it making profit for Apple? Yes. Is it satisfying the customer? Yes. Even though the changes are small, people are really excited. All the Apple users are excited about the new phones coming out. Is that clear? What's up here? Okay, so when I was talking about sprints are those short spans of time when you're just focusing on something really particular with that larger vision on mind and quickly working in those iterations. You're adapting and you're learning. So the biggest principle of agile thinking is you're not focused on sticking to a plan, but you're focused on reacting to change. So you're agile, you're flexible, and that really helps you. Traditionalists, when it comes to traditional way of product development, they're like, but we've not really worked that way before, so I'm not sure if this is going to help us. I can give you a real life example. Like I said, I work at the Fanatics facility. It's a really old building, 40 years old. It was majestic. At one point we acquired it, right? People have crazy tenures there, 20 years, 30 years, it's crazy. So when I'm like about to launch a new program there, everyone's like, no, but we've been doing it like this for 20 years. Well, we can go extinct if we continue to do that at this point, okay? So that was what agile product development is. If your agile is not really down your lane, if it's not really your thing, that's okay. Ask your team or ask your company to get in a Scrum Master or an agile course. I think they cost a lot of money, but I think the kind of project management and the agile thinking or mindset that they bring into the team is very, very helpful. Okay, an example of the agile product development. Let's say you're a car manufacturer and your customer wants a mode of transport. No, let's say you're starting a startup and you have an amazing customer who's like, hey, I know you're so good with all this mechanical stuff. I want a mode of transport. Why don't you build something? So now I started thinking and I'm like, oh, this is my best friend. Customer is king. Obviously, I want to give them the best. So I spent the next 12 months coming up with an amazing car, like a Tesla, an electric car. Has all the features, so cool. Everyone's going to be ogling at your car when it goes out on the road. But guess what? The customer is going to be sad until you hand them the car and the keys to the car. Do they have a mode of transport until you give them the keys to the car? No. So is their problem solved until you give them a car? No. But when you think of it in an agile manner, you're focusing on the problem from a customer point of view. You're not focused on yourself and what you think is going to solve their problem. All right, they need a mode of transport, let me give them a skateboard. So as you can see, at every step on the bottom row, the customer is still happy because, yes, the problem is getting solved. Whereas you go with the top row, do you think they're going to stick with you until you give them a car? They're just going to go find someone else to give them a mode of transport. Okay, I want to tell you that the agile sprints or the agile product development is just not a limited number of cycles. It can be n number of cycles. N can change, n can vary depending on the product, depending on the industry. Just bear in mind that, oh, yeah, this person figured it out in 3 cycles. Why is it taking me 5 cycles? Remember, more number of cycles means more robust a product. So don't worry about it. If it took them 3 cycles, let them take 3 cycles. If it's taking you 30 cycles, stick through it, because that's going to make you end up with more robust product. So at this point, at the end of step number 3, ask yourself, and it's really hard to put a number to the agile steps, right? But you can ask yourself, my MVP was a success. Now what do the agile stages in the product development look like? Just like the previous example I showed to you. All right, let's focus on the skateboard in the first month. Let's focus on the scooter in the second month. Let's focus on the bicycle in the third month. So just for you to think, what do the agile stages in my product development look like? So that sums up our session. The 3 steps of how a lean product development occurs is customer-centric thinking, lean prototyping, and agile product development. I want to tell you that, and this is from a meme, they say that success is never a straight line. It's crazy, right? I would say that you going from 0 to a product is never going to be a straight line. There's going to be ups and downs. And that area where the ups and downs occur is the agile product development zone. Every up, you'll get a learning. Every down, you'll get a learning. So takes a little bit of patience, takes a little bit of positive thinking too. And so I wish you all the best in creating maybe not the perfect product I don't really believe in the existence of perfection, but I'm sure it's going to be a great product. And once you're done with that, just sit back, relax, and let your marketing team work out their magic. Thank you so much. I have something for you. Remember all these questions that I was asking while we were going through the course? I just put together a worksheet that has the same questions and some space for you to jot down your thoughts. You can use it if you want. I don't want to like force it to you, but if you want it, you can definitely use it. If not, just make sure that you recycle it. Again, we're trying to think lean. It's the same questions that I was asking you throughout the session.
Any questions?
Yeah, sorry. Any questions? I think we're right on time. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm developing a platform that is targeting people who have student loan debt,
Mhm.
and then also for people who want to reskill and prepare for the future of tomorrow. It is well known that people who have student debt are not only students,